Good morning and happy Halloween. Those are those. Thanks for dropping by. We will be beginning shortly. Hope you're having a happy Halloween this morning. Well, it's morning for us. Yes, Cooper is enjoying the heat from the fireplace. Aren't you, buddy? Is it your favorite spot in the winter? So, the plan for this morning, in celebration of Halloween, is to test out the living room setup, as well as read some Edgar Allan Poe. Now, we're not sure how much the weird, creepy sounds in the background you're hearing, but we're trying to do a balance. We're kind of running by the seat of our pants today. Nothing special, nothing, no alerts, there's no music, just me and you and Cooper hanging out, reading a book. Also, I plan on trying to do a few of these today, so these are going to be shorter than usual. They're not going to be like marathons or anything. Just, nice little kickback. And a little happy Halloween to all the people who have supported me all year long. So, if apparently what we have here is the complete tales and poems of Edgar Allan Poe. Hey, what's up, Jordy Lane? Thanks for dropping by. So if anybody knows some Edgar Allan Poe that they'd like to hear read, now would be the time. What's your favorite? Hopefully that's not 300, 400, 500 pages long. We'll have to judge when we find out. How's it going today, Jordy? Happy Halloween. So, if nobody has any suggestions, let's see. Let's start with a classic. Oh, I think the beard is rubbing. Excuse me. Where is it here? The happiest sonnet science. I know I saw it in here earlier. Everyone's favorite. Any, let's see. Let's see what we got. Alright. The Island of Fae. Oh, there's quite a few. Probably quite a few I haven't heard. There we go. Poetry. I think poetry is always... Oh, okay, page 68. There we are. He is. He is the goodest of boys. He's an awesome dog. Yeah, I will be in a little bit, but not exactly at the moment, Jordy. But I'll tell you what, I'll do it right after we finish this one. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, you ready, Cooper? The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. "Only this, and nothing more." Ah, distinctly I remember it. It was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Vainly I had sought to borrow from my book's surcease of sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels name Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the skillin', sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before. So that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. Some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This is it, and nothing more." This is getting good. Alright, where were we? Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir, and I, or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore. But the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping, tapping in my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you. Here I opened wide the door, darkness there and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming, dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the darkness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, "Lenore." This I whispered, and echo murmured back the word, "Lenore." Merely this and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning. Soon again I heard a tapping, somewhat louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then what thereat it is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still at a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind and nothing more." Open here I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter, in there stepped a stately raven of saintly days of yore. Not the least not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with mine of lord or lady perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of Pallas, just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird, beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art sure no craven, ghastly, grim, and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore. Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." Much I marveled, this ungainly fowl, to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculptured bust of his chamber door, with such a name as Nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing farther than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, "Other friends have flown before, on the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before." Then the bird said, "Nevermore." Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, "Doubtless," said I, "what it utters is only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master, whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore, of nevermore." But the raven still beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of a bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking, "Nevermore." This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing, to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining, on the cushion's velvet lining, that the limp light gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lining with a lamplight gloating o'er, she shall press, nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed and unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by these angels he hath sent thee, respite, nipping from thy memories of Lenore. Quaff, oh quaff, this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore, quoth the raven, nevermore. Oh, excuse me. Ah. Hoy, 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 Top Gaming 99. Let's see, where were we here? Ah. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil. Whether tempter sent or weather, tempest tossed thee here ashore. Desolate yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted. Tell me truly, I implore. Is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aidenn it shall clasp a sainted maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden, who the angels named Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked up starting. Get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy shell hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. And that's the raven. How's everybody doing this morning? Happy Halloween. Anybody have any requests? We're doing Edgar Allan Poe. Let's see what else we got here. We got some short stuff, I think. Ooh, man. Oh, here's one. Deep in Earth by Edgar Allan Poe. Deep in earth my love is lying, and I must weep alone. Apparently, he also wrote some very short poems. Okay, let's see here. Oh, Geordie Lion, really? Was it 5 months? Holy cow. Yeah, I guess, holy cow, yeah. It's hard to believe it's already been 5 months. Congratulations to the Geordie Lion. Thank you for the 5 months, buddy. Happy Halloween. It's just not the same without you. But, you know, it was kind of tough getting everything set up this morning as it was. Alright, let's see here. Alright. Anybody else know any Edgar Allan Poe? Let's see. The Raven was very good. Oh, how about a Valentine? For her this rhyme is penned, whose luminous eyes, brightly expressive as the twins of Loda, shall find her own sweet name. That nestling lies upon the page and wrapped from every reader. Search narrowly the lines, they hold a treasure divine, a talisman, an amulet, that must be worn at heart. Search well the measure, the words, the syllables, do not forget. The trivialist point, or you may lose your labor. And yet there is no Gordian knot which one might undo without a saber, if one could merely comprehend the plot, and written upon the leaf where now are peering. Eyes scintillating soul, there lie Purtis, very eloquent words oft uttered in the hearing of poets by poets, as the name is a poet's too, in letters although naturally lying, like the knight Pinto, Mendez, Ferdinando, still form of synonym that for truth. Cease trying. You will not read the riddle, though you do the best you can do. Jeez, my God, that's a hell of a Valentine. My God, that's pretty. He was a pretty cold-hearted bastard. How much do you see of the chat? Probably about 3 lines, like the last 3 lines. So I'm completely oblivious to what's going on. But thank God the Geordie Lion is here to take care of the chat. It's getting a little hot over there, buddy. You sure you don't want to back it off? Okay, let's see here. We're gonna do. Let's see if I can find one of my favorites. Where is it? It's got to be here somewhere. Let's see here. Oh, I could have swore it was one of his. Maybe I'm thinking of someone else. Fall of the House of Usher, yes. Oh, there it is, 772. Okay, here we go. TNT 118. Hey, how's it going? Good morning, Chief, he says. Yeah, I'm doing alright, TNT. How are you this morning? Hope you got your coffee. Just doing a little Edgar Allan Poe. We just finished up, what was it? Valentine and The Raven. We started out with The Raven, which was quite a good time. I really enjoyed The Raven. How are you doing this fine morning? Happy Halloween. Oh, rubbing the mic. Alright. I'm going to get started on the next one here. How far we got? This is going to be, it's a couple pages. It's amazing how much you can fit into a couple pages. Alright, TNT 118, thanks for dropping by. One of our VIPs and one of our first followers. Alright, let's give this one a shot. I have to lose these for the moment. I'll just throw them down there. Alright, Hop Frog. Oh, one of my favorites. If you guys haven't ever read Hop Frog, or a lot of Edgar Allan Poe stuff is a lot like this, there's some good stuff. I never knew anyone so keenly alive to a joke as the king was. He seemed to live only for joking, to tell a good story of the joke kind, and to tell it well, was the surest road to his favor. Thus it happened that his 7 ministers were all noted for their accomplishments as jokers. They all took after the king, too, in being large, corpulent, oily men, as well as inimitable jokers. Whether people grow fat by joking, or whether there is something in fat itself which predisposes to a joke, I have never been quite able to determine. But certain it is that a lean joker is a rare avis in terris. About the refinements, or as he called them, the ghosts of wit, the king troubled himself very little. He had an especial admiration for breadth and jest, and would often put up with length for the sake of it. Over niceties wearied him. He would have preferred Rabelais's Gargantua to the Zadig of Voltaire, and upon the whole, practical jokes suited his taste far better than verbal ones. At the date of my narrative, professing jesters had not altogether gone out of fashion at the court. Several of the great continental powers still retained their fools, who were motley, with caps and bells, and who were expected to be always ready with sharp witticisms at a moment's notice, in consideration of the crumbs that fell from the royal table. Our king, as a matter of course, retained his fool. The fact is, he required something in the way of folly, if only to counterbalance the heavy wisdom of the 7 wise men who were his ministers, not to mention himself. His fool, or professional jester, was not only a fool, however. His value was trebled in the eyes of the king by the fact of his being also a dwarf and a cripple. Dwarfs were as common at court in those days as fools, and many monarchs would have found it difficult to get through their days. Days are rather longer in court than elsewhere, without both a jester to laugh with and a dwarf to laugh at. But as I have already observed, your jesters in 99 cases out of 100 are fat, round, and unwieldy. So that it was no small source of self-gratulation with our king that in Hop Frog, this was the fool's name, he possessed a triplicate treasure in one person. I believe the name Hop Frog was not that given to the dwarf by his sponsors at baptism, but it was conferred upon him by general consent of the several ministers on account of his inability to walk as other men do. In fact, Hop Frog could only get along by a sort of interjectional gait, something between a leap and a wriggle, a movement that afforded illimitable amusement and, of course, consolation to the king, for notwithstanding the protuberance of his stomach and a constitutional swelling of the head, the king, by his whole court, was accounted a capital figure. But although Hop Frog, through the distortion of his legs, could move only with great pain and difficulty along a road or floor, the prodigious muscular power which nature seemed to have bestowed upon his arms by way of compensation for deficiency in the lower limbs enabled him to perform many feats of wonderful dexterity, where trees or ropes were in question, or anything else to climb. At such exercises he certainly much more resembled a squirrel or a small monkey than a frog. I am not able to say with precision from what country Hop Frog originally came. It was from some barbarous region, however, that no person ever heard of, a vast distance from the court of our king. Hop Frog and a young girl were little less dwarfish than himself, although of exquisite proportions and a marvelous dancer, had been forcibly carried off from their respective homes in adjoining provinces, and sent as presents to the king by one of his ever-victorious generals. Under these circumstances, it is not to be wondered at that of a close intimacy arose between the 2 little captives. Indeed, they soon became sworn friends. Hop Frog, who, although he made a great deal of sport, was by no means popular, had it not in his power to render Trippetta many services, but she, on account of her grace and exquisite beauty, although a dwarf, was universally admired and petted, so she possessed much influence and never failed to use it, whenever she could, for the benefit of Hop Frog. On some grand state occasion, I forgot what the king determined to have a masquerade. And whenever a masquerade or anything of that kind occurred at our court, then the talents both of Hop Frog and Trippetta were sure to be called into play. Hop Frog in especial, was so inventive in the way of getting up pageants suggesting novel characters in a raging costume for masked balls that nothing could be done, it seems, without his assistance. The night appointed for the fit had arrived. A gorgeous hall had been fitted up under Trippetta's eye with every kind of device which could possibly give a clot to a masquerade. The whole court was in a fever of expectation. As for costumes and characters, it might well be supposed that everybody had come to a decision on such points. Many had made up their minds as to what roles they should assume, a week or even a month in advance, and in fact there was not a particle of indecision anywhere except in the case of the king and his 7 ministers. Why they hesitated I never could tell, unless they did it by way of a joke. More probably they found it difficult, on account of being so fat, to make up their minds. At all the events, time flew, and as a last resource they sent for Trippetta and Hop Frog. When the 2 little friends obeyed the summons of the king, they found him sitting at his wine with 7 members of his cabinet council. But the monarch appeared to be in a very ill humor. He knew that Hop Frog was not fond of wine, for it excited the poor cripple almost to madness, and madness is no comfortable feeling. But the king loved his practical jokes and took pleasure in forcing Hop Frog to drink, and as the king called it, to be merry. "Come here, Hop Frog," said he as the jester and friend entered the room. "Swallow this bumper to the health of your absent friends." Here Hop Frog sighed, "And then let us have the benefit of your invention. We want characters, man, something novel, out of the way. We are wearied with this everlasting sameness. Come, drink. The wine will brighten your wits." Hop Frog endeavored, as usual, to get up a jest in reply to these advances from the king, but the effort was too much. It happens to be the poor dwarf's birthday, and the command to drink to his absent friends forced the tears to his eyes. Many large, bitter drops fell into the goblet as he took it humbly from the hand of the tyrant. "Ah, ha, 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 ha!" roared the latter, as the dwarf reluctantly drained the beaker. "See what a glass of good wine can do, while your eyes are shining and already." Poor fellow, his large eyes gleamed rather than shone, from the effect of the wine on his excitable brain was not more powerful than instantaneous. He placed the goblet nervously on the table and looked round upon the company with a half-insane stare. They all seemed highly amused at the success of the king's joke. "And now to business," said the prime minister. "Yes," said the king. "Come, Hop Frog, lend us your assistance. Characters, my fine fellow, we stand in need of characters, all of us." And as this was seriously meant for a joke, his laugh was chorused by the 7. Hop Frog also laughed, although feebly and somewhat vacantly. "Come, come," said the king impatiently. "Have you nothing to suggest?" "I am endeavoring to think of something novel," replied the dwarf abstractedly, for he was quite bewildered by the wine. "Endeavoring!" cried the tyrant fiercely. "What do you mean by that?" "Ah, I perceive. You are sulky and want more wine. Here, drink this." He poured it out another goblet full and offered to the cripple, who merely gazed at it, gasping for breath. "Drink, I say," shouted the monster, "or by the fiends." The dwarf hesitated. The king grew purple with rage. The courtiers smirked. Trippetta, pale as a corpse, advanced to the monarch's seat, and falling on her knees before him, implored him to spare her friend. The tyrant regarded her for some moments in evident wonder of her audacity. He seemed quite at a loss what to do or say, how most becomingly to express his indignation. At last, without uttering a syllable, he pushed her violently from him, and threw the contents of the brimming goblet in her face. The poor girl got up as best she could, and not daring even to sigh, resumed her position at the foot of the table. There was a dead silence for about half a minute, during which the falling of a leaf or of a feather might have been heard. It was interrupted by a low but harsh and protracted grating sound, which seemed to come at once from every corner of the room. What are you making that noise for?" demanded the king, turning furiously toward the dwarf. The latter seemed to have recovered in great measure from his intoxication, and looking fixedly but quietly into the tyrant's face, ejaculated, how could it have been me? The sound appeared to come from without, observed one of the courtiers. I fancy it was the parrot at the window, wetting his bill upon his cage wires. True, replied the monarch, as if much relieved by the suggestion, but on the honor of a knight I could have sworn that it was the gritting of this vagabond's teeth. Hereupon the dwarf laughed. The king was too confirmed a joker to object to anyone's laughing, and displayed a set of large, powerful, and very repulsive teeth. Moreover, he avowed his perfect willingness to swallow as much wine as desired. The monarch was pacified, and having drained another bumper, with no perceptible effect, Hopfrog entered at once, and with spirit, into the plans for the masquerade. I cannot tell what was the association of idea, observed he very tranquilly, and as if he had never tasted wine in his life. But just after your majesty had struck the girl and thrown the wine in her face, just after your majesty had done this, and while the parrot was making that odd noise outside the window, there came into my mind a capital diversion, one of my own country frolics, often enacted among us at our masquerades. But here it will be new altogether. Unfortunately, however, it requires a company of 8 persons. And here we are, cried the king, laughing at his acute discovery of the coincidence. 8 to a fraction, I and my 7 ministers. Come, what is the diversion? We call it, replied the cripple, the 8 chained orangutans, and it really is excellent sport if well enacted. We will enact it, remarked the king, drawing himself up and lowering his eyelids. The beauty of the game, continued Hopfrog, lies in the fright it occasions among the women. Capital, roared in chorus the monarch and his ministry. I will equip you as orangutans, proceeded the dwarf. Leave all that to me. The resemblance shall be so striking that the company of masqueraders will take you for the real beasts, and of course they will be as much terrified as astonished. Oh, this is exquisite, exclaimed the king. Hopfrog, I will make a man of you. The chains are for the purpose of increasing the confusion by their jangling. You are supposed to have escaped en masse from your keepers. Your majesty cannot conceive the effect produced as a masquerade by 8 chained orangutans, imagined to be the real ones by most of the company, and rushing in with savage cries among the crowd of delicately, gorgeously habited men and women. The contrast is inimitable. It must be, said the king, and the council rose hurriedly, as it was growing late, to put into execution the scheme of Hopfrog. His mode of equipping the party as orangutans was very simple, but effective enough for his purposes. The animals in question had, at the epoch of my story, very rarely been set in any part of the civilized world, and as the imitations made by the dwarf were sufficiently beast-like and more than sufficiently hideous, their truthfulness to the nature was thus thought to be secured. The king and his ministers were first encased in tight-fitting, socketed shirts and drawers. They were then saturated with tar. At this stage of the process, someone of the party suggested feathers, but the suggestion was at once overruled by the dwarf, who soon convinced the 8 by ocular demonstration that the hair of such a brute as the orangutan was much more efficiently represented by flax. A thick coating of the latter was accordingly plastered upon the coating of tar. A long chain was now procured. First it was passed about the waist of the king and tied, then about another of the party and also tied, and then about all successively in the same manner. When this chaining arrangement was complete and the party stood as far apart from each other as possible, they formed a circle, and to make all things appear natural, Hopfrog passed the residue of the chain in 2 diameters, at right angles across the circle, after the fashion adopted at the present day by those who capture chimpanzees or other large apes in Borneo. The grand saloon in which the masquerade was to take place was a circular room, very lofty, and receiving the light of the sun only through a single window at top. At night, the season for which the apartment was especially designed, it was illuminated principally by a large chandelier, depending by a chain from the center of the skylight, and lowered or elevated by means of a counterbalance, as usual. But in order not to look unsightly, this ladder passed outside the cupola and over the roof. The arrangements of the roof had been left to Trippetta's superintendence, but in some particulars, it seems, she had been guided by the calmer judgment of her dwarf friend the dwarf. At his suggestion it was that, on this occasion, the chandelier was removed. Its waxen drippings, which in weather so warm it was quite impossible to prevent, would have been seriously detrimental to the rich dresses of the guests, on account of the crowded state of the saloon, could not all be expected to keep from out of its center. That is to say, from under the chandelier, additional sconces were set in various parts of the hall out of the way, and a flambeau emitting sweet odor was placed in the right hand of each of the caryatides that stood against the wall. Some 50 or 60 altogether. The 8 orangutans, taking Hop Frog's advice, waited patiently until midnight, when the room was thoroughly filled with masqueraders, before making their appearance. No sooner had the clock ceased striking, however, than they rushed, or rather rolled in altogether, for the impediment of their change caused most of the party to fall, and all to stumble as they entered. The excitement among the masqueraders was prodigious, and filled the heart of the king with glee. As had been anticipated, there were not a few of the guests who supposed the ferocious-looking creatures to be beasts of some kind in reality, if not precisely orangutans. Many of the women swooned with affright, and had not the king taken the precaution to exclude all weapons from the saloon, his party might soon have expiated their frolic in their blood. As it was, a general rush was made for the doors, but the king had ordered them to be locked immediately upon his entrance, and at the dwarf's suggestion, the keys had been deposited with him. While the tumult was at its height, and each masquerader attentive only to his own safety, for in fact there was much real danger from the pressure of the excited crowd, the chain by which the chandelier ordinarily hung, and which had been drawn up on its removal, might have been seen very gradually to descend, until its hooked extremity came within 3 feet of the floor. Soon after this, the king and his 7 friends, having reeled about the hall in all directions, found themselves at length in its center, and of course in immediate contact with the chain. While they were thus situated, the dwarf, who had followed closely at their heels, inciting them to keep up the commotion, took hold of their own chain at the intersection of the 2 portions which crossed the circle diametrically and at right angles. Here, with the rapidity of thought, he inserted the hook from which the chandelier had been wont to depend, and in an instant, by some unseen agency, the chandelier chain was drawn so far upwards as to take the hook out of reach, and as an inevitable consequence, to drag the orangutans together in close connection and face to face. The masqueraders by this time had recovered in some measure from their alarm, and beginning to regard the whole matter as a well-contrived pleasantry, set up a loud shout of laughter at the predicament of the apes. "Leave them to me now," screamed Hop Frog, his shrill voice making itself easily heard through all the din. "Leave them to me. I fancy I know them. If I can only get a good look at them, I can soon tell who they are." Here, scrambling over the heads of the crowd, he managed to get to the wall, when seizing a flambeau from one of the caryatides, he returned as he went to the center of the room, leaping with the agility of a monkey upon the king's head, and thence clambered a few feet up the chain, holding down the torch, to examine the group of orangutans, and still screaming, "I shall soon find out who they are." And now, while the whole assembly, the apes included, were convulsed with laughter, the jester suddenly uttered a shrill whistle, when the chain flew violently up for about 30 feet, dragging with it the dismayed and struggling orangutans, and leaving them suspended in mid-air between the skylight and the floor. Hop Frog, clinging to the chain as it rose, still maintained his relative position in respect to the 8 maskers, and still, as if noting as nothing were the matter, continued to thrust his torch downwards toward them, as though endeavoring to discover who they were. So thoroughly astonished were the whole company at this ascent, that a dead silence of about a minute's duration ensued. It was broken by just such a low, harsh, grating sound as had before attracted the attention of the king and his counselors, when the former threw the wine in the face of Trippetta. But on the present occasion there could be no question as to whence the sound issued. It came from the fang-like teeth of the dwarf, who ground them and gnashed them as he foamed at the mouth, and glared with an expression of maniacal rage into the upturned countenances of the king and his 7 companions. Aha, said at length the infuriated jester. Aha, I begin to see who these people are now. Here, pretending to scrutinize the king more closely, he held the flambeau to the flaxen coat which enveloped him, and which instantly burst into a sheet of vivid flame. In less than half a minute, the whole 8 orangutans were blazing fiercely amid the shrieks of the multitude, who gazed at them from below, horror-stricken, and without the power to render them the slightest assistance. At length the flame suddenly increased in virulence, forced the jester to climb higher up the chain, to be out of their reach, and as he made this movement the crowd again sank for a brief instant into silence. The dwarf seized his opportunity and once more spoke. I now see distinctly, he said, what manner of people these maskers are. They are a great king and his 7 privy councillors, a king who does not scruple to strike a defenseless girl, and his 7 councillors who abet him in the outrage. As for myself, I am simply Hopfrog the jester, and this is my last jest. Owing to the high combustibility of both the flax and the tar to which it adhered, the dwarf had scarcely made an end of his brief speech before the work of vengeance was complete. The 8 corpses swung in their chains, a fetid, black, and hideous, and indistinguishable mass. The cripple hurled his torch at them, clambered leisurely to the ceiling, and disappeared through the skylight. It is supposed that Trippetta, stationed on the roof of the saloon, had been the accomplice of her friend in his fiery revenge, and that together they effected their escape to their own country, for neither was seen again. All right. Oh, are you kidding me? Sean Connery died? Well, that's a shame. I was always a big fan of Sean Connery. All right. Any requests? Might have time for one more story. I'll probably in a couple hours, maybe if depending on how the day goes, I'll try and come on and do some more. Oh, you'd never heard Hopfrog before, TNT. Awesome. Yeah, it's probably a little darker than for high school. But yeah, I can't remember where there was a class we did a lot on Edgar Allan Poe in high school. Let's see. Yeah, Lenore, we did that. Here we go. We'll do this one. Hey, buddy. You doing all right over there? You're in a cleaning fervor. Maybe you should back away from the fire a little bit. The Haunted Palace. Oh, excuse me. The Haunted Palace. This one's for Sean Connery. May he rest in peace. What a shame. In the greenest of our valleys, by good angels tenanted, once a fair and stately palace, radiant palace, reared its head. In the monarch thought's dominion, it stood there. Never seraph spread of pinion over fabric half so fair. Banners yellow, glorious golden, on its roof did float and flow. All this was in the olden times, long ago. And every gentle air that dallied in the sweet day, along the ramparts plumed and pallid, a winged odor went away. Wanderers in that happy valley through 2 luminous windows saw spirits moving musically to a lute's well-tuned law. Round about a throne were sitting Polly Phyrogene in a state his glory well befitting, the ruler of the realm was seen. And all with pearl and ruby glowing was the fair palace door, through which came flowing, 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 and sparkling evermore a troop of echoes whose sweet duty was but to sing, in voices of surpassing beauty, the wit and wisdom of their king. But evil things in robes of sorrow assailed the monarch's high estate. Ah, let us mourn, for never sorrow shall dawn upon him desolate. And round about his home the glory that blushed and bloomed is but a dim remembered story of the old time entombed. And travelers now within that valley, through the red-litten windows, oh, there we go. Through the red-litten windows, vast forms that moved fantastically to a discordant melody, while, like a ghastly rapid river, through the pale door a hideous throng rush out forever, and laugh but smile no more. Wow. He really went to time on the bells, apparently. Yeah, maybe this will be good. I've never read this one before. For Annie. Thank heaven, the crisis, the danger is past, and the lingering illness is over at last, and the fever called living is conquered at last. Sadly, I know I am shorn of my strength, and no muscle I move as I lie at full length. But no matter, I feel I am better at length, and I rest so composedly now in my bed that any beholder might fancy me dead. My start are beholding me, thinking me dead. The moaning and groaning, the sighing and sobbing are quieted now with the horrible throbbing at heart. Ah, that horrible, horrible throbbing! The sickness, the nausea, the pitiless pain have ceased with the fever that maddened my brain, with the fever called living that burned in my brain. And oh, of all tortures, the torture the worst has abated the terrible torture of thirst. For the naphthaline river of passion accursed, I have drank of a water that quenches all thirst, of a water that flows with a lullaby sound from a spring but a very few feet underground, from a cavern not very far down underground. And ah, let it never be foolishly said that my room it is gloomy and narrow my bed, for man never slept in a different bed, and to sleep you must slumber in just such a bed. My tantalized spirit here blandly reposes, forgetting or never regretting its roses. Its old agitations of myrtles and roses were now while so quietly lying it fancies a holier odor about it of pansies, a rosemary odor commingled with pansies, with rue and the beautiful Puritan pansies. And so it lies happily, bathing in many a dream of the truth and the beauty of Annie. Drowned in a bath of the tresses of Annie, she tenderly kissed me, she fondly caressed, and then I fell gently to sleep on her breast, deeply to sleep from the heaven of her breast. When the light was extinguished, she covered me warm, and she prayed to the angels to keep me from harm, to the Queen of the angels to shield me from harm. And I lie so composedly now in my bed, knowing her love, that you fancy me dead. And I rest so contentedly now in my bed, with her love at my breast, that you fancy me dead, that you shudder to look at me, thinking me dead. But my heart it is brighter than all of the many stars in the sky, for it sparkles with Annie. It glows with the light of the love of my Annie, with the thought of the light of the eyes of my Annie. Nice one. Okay, I think we're gonna do one more, and then we're gonna take a break. Maybe come back and do some more in a little, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours. Might do a regular stream sometime today too. Any requests? I'm more than happy to search through this book if anyone has something old favorite. Okay, we're going to do one last short one here, and then we're going to wrap it up for a short time. Or we'll see. Hope everyone's having a great Halloween morning. Hope you, or if you're on some other side of the world, having a great Halloween. Okay, El Dorado. Gaily bedight, a gallant knight, in sunshine and in shadow, had journeyed long, singing a song in search of El Dorado. But he grew old, this knight so bold, nor his heart a shadow. Fell as he found no spot of ground that looked like El Dorado. And as his strength failed him at length, he met a pilgrim's shadow. Shadow, said he, where can it be, this land of El Dorado? Over the mountains of the moon, down the valley of the shadow, ride boldly ride. The shade replied, if you seek for El Dorado. Ooh, Annabelle Lee. We'll do that one too. How long is that? Oh, maybe we'll save that for. Yeah, we'll save that one for next one. That's pretty good. All right. All right. Thanks for dropping by, everybody. Happy Halloween. Yep, we're about to shut her down for now, Doze and Rose. Thanks for coming by. We'll probably pick up the book a little later on in the day. Hope everyone had a good time. And have a happy and safe Halloween if we don't see you. Take care.